Hi there, it's Nicole with my July 2015 Paper Doll Art Journal. I'm a little late getting it shared, but I am going to get all of my pages for 2015 caught up here before the end of the year. This page is going to be kind of a beach themed. I am using leftover pattern papers from the July 2015 Simon Says Stamp Card Kit, which inspired this entire layout here. I have both a girl and boy image from the Julie Nutting stamps, and I'm using some of the Julie Nutting buff paper pad for my images. Just a couple of different shades here. That's going to be the skin tone. Then I am using the school wear and skirts and pants stamp sets from Julie Nutting that match the Marisol and Adam stamps, so you can customize their clothing for these dolls. I really love that there are a couple of images that you can just change up their clothing. So you could essentially maybe just buy a couple, these two doll stamps, and then simply change out their clothing if you want to just try them out. Next, I am going to take some Copic markers and add some shading. With using the buff paper pad, that does help with my skin tone a little bit. However, I really like the depth and dimension I get by adding some shading with Copic markers. You could use other colors of markers, or other brands rather, if you prefer, or colored pencils, or anything like that. I simply kind of stick with the Copics because they're easy. I've used them enough that I kind of know what I like. I only need to do basically the face and hair on my images. The clothing is all going to be out of these pattern papers that I've stamped and fussy cut. Building up my hair color here. For the clothing, I do like to add a tiny bit of shading. I'm using some warm gray markers. Any Copic markers that I am using here today, the individual marker colors are going to be shown across the bottom of the screen. And build up that darkest color and then blend it out with my two lighter colors. It really adds dimension and, of course, coordinates with the shading that you do for the skin tone and hair. Blending that out with my lightest color quite a bit. I used a little bit of blue there for the pants and then a nice nautical striped shirt. I'm going to use a glue pen to go ahead and glue those in place. I like to glue the clothing to the doll before I do any fussy cutting of the doll. I think it helps with the stability of the doll itself and makes it a little bit easier to cut out. You could do it any way that you prefer. Again, adding some of that shading with some warm gray markers to the shirt. Blending it out with my lightest warm gray 00. Building in some of those shadows underneath the arms and things a little bit darker. And around the little placket on the shirt. Then I'll go ahead and glue the shirt in place. And then I can fussy cut this doll. Super easy and fun. I love that there is great guy images now to go along with all of the girl images. It makes for creating some really fun scenes. I have used both of these dolls before in another layout, completely different style, and it's linked at the end of this video if you want to check it out. I dressed them completely different. Just lots and lots of ways that you can use these images, and just by mixing and matching the clothing, change them up. I like to cut out the little inside areas between the legs and arms with a craft knife first, and then go ahead and go in with my scissors and do the fussy cutting. A little bit trickier around the hair, especially if the hair is curly. But I'll go ahead and just get him all cut out. And then I will move on to the girl. I used a little bit different shade of paper here, so I'm going to use a couple of different colors of markers in a different color combination. Again, just building up that color. The color is a great, nice base color as opposed to maybe a more white text paper like I've used in the past. I really like the colors of these papers as the base, and then it's a little bit easier to build up the skin color, I've found, especially if you're maybe going to go for a little bit more darker skin colors like I did here today. I think the base just provides that great starting point. Again, building up, adding some darker shadows and things like that. And then I can move on to the hair. I'm going to use the same colors that I used for the guy's hair, with the addition of I will pull in a little E79 here in a little bit to give it a little tiny bit of a brown undertone. I love to just play around with different color combinations for the hair. This is one of my tried and true, the C5, 9, and BV04 for dark or blackish hair. But if you want to play around with it a little bit and just try to get a few different shades, you can do that with any markers you have. And like I said, I used a little E79 here in a little bit to build up that color. Again, I want to add those shading and shadowing and dimension to the clothing. I'm using those warm gray markers again for her top and skirt. I love the kind of beach or nautical theme of the pattern papers from the July card kit. It is no longer available. However, I have linked to the papers that I have used. Go ahead and attach the clothing to the doll, and I can fussy cut her as well. The hat here is from one of the accessory stamp sets from Julie Nutting, just from a little bit of cream or white paper from the card kit, blending it out with my warm gray markers. Again, I want to cut out those inside areas where the hand is next to the body and between the legs with a craft knife before I go ahead and fussy cut the image with my scissors. I went ahead and cut them out and then attached the clothing. I'm also going to snip off the top of the shoulder straps on her top. I thought they were a little too long. Just ways to customize it to make the design work for you. And I even went in later and added some more shading with some of my dark markers. And here's that E79 that I added to her hair. And I really kind of like how that looks. Went back with my C9 then, if I got it just a tiny bit too brown. I can pop her hat into place. I'll glue that down. And then I thought the hat needed a little bow, so I'm going to stamp a bow out of that same anchor paper, add my shadowing and shading, fussy cut that, and attach it right to the hat and the doll. Now they need some accessories, and I love the Mama Elephant geotagged stamp set, the suitcase from it. It is perfectly sized for these dolls. I've used it before. I think it's fabulous. So I went ahead and used scraps of the pattern papers, stamped them on about 4 different papers, and then fussy cut the different elements and layered the designs. So the straps on the suitcases and then those corners are going to be a different shade than the primary part of the suitcase. And then you can cut the whole thing out, and I'll attach those to both the boy and girl dolls so that it appears that they're holding them in their hands, ready to set sail on vacation. So a little tricky trimming all these little pieces out, but definitely worth it for the nice layered look of these suitcases. And the pattern papers from this have nice small designs, which I think work really well for these small clothing and accessories that I'm using here for my July paper doll page. I always prefer a pattern paper that has a smaller design in it for these kinds of art journal pages. Again, I'll go ahead and just cut all of these out. And then I can fussy cut both of the suitcases. Again, adding some shading with my warm gray markers. Very, very quick and easy. Little warm gray 2 and warm gray 00. And then I did snip one side of the suitcase handle so that I could tuck that over her wrist. And that kind of disguises that I snipped that. And then I will do the same thing for the one the guy is holding and attach those both to the dolls. Now I have a bunch of Bristol watercolor paper here, a 6x8 background, plus I have die cut a sun and a palm tree using a design from the Silhouette online store. I've die cut those from watercolor paper, and then I'm using some of these stitched hillside borders from Lawn Fawn to die cut a couple of wave borders and a sand border, and I'm going to build my scene. I could have maybe done this with pattern papers even. You definitely could do that with pattern papers. But I really wanted to do something custom, and I'm going to be coloring in all of these elements with distress inks and then distressing them further with water from the distress sprayer. So first on my background, I'm going to take Barn Door, Spiced Marmalade, and Fossilized Amber distress inks and apply those to my 6x8 background. This is the actual background page for my art journal. And I'm just kind of laying that color down, and I'll blend it more as I go to really kind of get that seamless transition from the Barn Door to Spiced Marmalade to the Fossilized Amber. So I laid it down, and then I went back and kind of in a more circular motion blended those colors together really nicely. I didn't have to go all the way to the bottom of the page. That's all going to be covered up with my borders. Went back in with my Barn Door, getting a nice, like I said, seamless transition of the colors. I'll take the distress sprayer filled with water and only partially squeezing that trigger. It's going to give me those great big drops. I'm going to let them sit there for just a second. Not real long, just a little bit, and then I'm going to pick them up with a damp rag, and you can see the great result you get with that. Again, I'm going to take Fossilized Amber for the setting sun that I've die cut from the watercolor cardstock. Going to spritz it and do the exact same technique. I'm going to do this on all of the elements. This is my first time using the distress sprayer. I just picked it up. I absolutely love it. It gives those great big drops. So for those really great distress effects you can get with distress ink, I absolutely love it. I picked up the ink on my setting sun. I used some Mowed Lawn and Gathered Twigs distress ink on the palm tree. This was what I used first. I knew all along I was going to cover this up with a darker color of ink just so that some of this ink shows up underneath when I distress it, because I don't want it to be quite so bright. I'm taking the espresso stain, or yes, I believe that's what it's called, ground espresso, sorry, and I'm going to kind of cover up the entire thing with that. You can kind of still see the green at the top or whatever, but I want it to have more of that silhouette type of look. I'll spritz it and then again dab off my ink, and you can see it really gives a great effect for the palm tree. I'm going to ink up the edge with some Gathered Twigs distress ink on the setting sun, just to give it a little definition from the background. Then for both of the waves, I'm applying Chipped Sapphire and Blueprint Sketch distress ink. Again, I don't have to go all the way to the bottom. Part of that's going to get covered up. So I just want to make sure along the wavy border that I've applied some ink. Spritz those again. Get that same great effect. Dab off any of that. And I really like this for the water. I think it gives a nice effect for the waves there that are going to go along the bottom of my page. Make sure to clean the craft sheet really good in between each inking so you don't mix any colors, especially when I'm doing like the antique linen here for the sandy beach layer. I did spritz it just a tiny bit. I think it pulled a little too much color off, so I went back in with my antique linen distress ink and applied more ink over that. I'm going to stamp a phrase now from the Simon Says Stamp Sail Away stamp set, and then I will simply put all of the elements together to finish off my page. So I'm going to start with my one wave layer, tuck that setting sun underneath that layer. I just love the distressing you get with the distress sprayer filled with water. think it's fabulous. Add my other wave layer, then the sandy beach, my palm tree. I'm going to tuck there, right there by the sun. And then I can add some glue to both the girl and boy, or the guy and gal. Glue those in place. I'm just using something heavy to hold them down while that glue dries. And that's basically it for my page. I am going to take a black gel pen and add some detail to the buttons on the clothing and the suitcases. But other than that, that finishes up my July 2015 Paper Doll Art Journal page. Thanks for watching this video showcasing my Paper Doll Art Journal page for July 2015. The supplies I've used are listed and linked below the video on YouTube. Here are a couple more links to more Paper Doll Art Journal pages I've created this year. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.